Hello, welcome everyone. Please take a moment before we begin to fill out the pre-evaluation survey, which is linked in your email. You should have also received this guidebook, which contains all of the resources that we will go over today, as well as the recipe catalog featuring local seasonal recipes for the Pacific Northwest. Hello everyone, welcome to our discussion on local seasonality and sustainable nutrition. Although it's a topic for everyone anywhere, I've fine-tuned this program to be specific to the Pacific Northwest, and today we'll focus on Western Washington, counties of Pierce, King, and Thurston. This short discussion will be followed by a recipe demonstration featuring local seasonal ingredients that emphasize a whole foods plant-based style of eating, which is really the cornerstone of sustainable nutrition. In addition, you'll be provided with the guidebook to capture all of the resources that we discuss, as well as a recipe catalog featuring seasonal recipes that use local Pacific Northwest ingredients. It is my pleasure to be here with you today, and I appreciate you being here with me. The program is designed to provide you with information, resources, tools, and support for participating in an important movement that has significant positive impact on the environment, global hunger, food security, as well as personal health and wellness. I should mention that the program was originally designed to be delivered in person, but due to COVID-19, I decided to offer it in a virtual format. I would have wished we could discuss concepts and ideas together as a group, as well as, more importantly, taste the recipe together. However, despite this alternative format, you will still be provided with ample information, tools, resources for eating locally, seasonally, and sustainably. As we begin, I want to ask a question. What percentage of Americans do you think were living on farms in the early 1900s? Nobody? I didn't hear anyone. Okay, I'll tell you. 40%. 40% of Americans lived on farms in the early 1900s, compared to today, 1% of Americans live on farms. Much of the food bought and consumed in the United States was grown locally. For many foods, consumption was dictated by local seasonality. Communities gained knowledge of the quality of the foods through direct contact with their farmers. Aside from canning to hydrating, salting, few foods were actually processed or packaged, and fruits and vegetables, fish, and dairy products typically traveled less than one day to the market. However, following World War II industrialization, the U.S. food system shifted from local to national and global food sources, spurred by lower transportation costs and improvements in refrigerated trucking. Now we'll continue our discussion on local seasonality and sustainable nutrition in the Pacific Northwest. The conventional U.S. agricultural system today is highly centralized and resource-intensive, involving very weak links between production and consumption. This leads to an agri-food system that is unsustainable, contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and high levels of malnutrition. The effects from within the food supply chain, from input production to processing, distribution, preparation, consumption, and waste disposal contribute to huge global challenges we face, such as food insecurity, poverty, and environmental degradation. Global food production threatens climate stability and ecosystem resilience. Today, 820 million people lack sufficient food, and many more consume low-quality diets or too much food and not enough nutrition. On top of this, it is estimated that by 2050, we will need to feed an additional 2.5 billion people. Rates of diseases of morbidity and mortality in the U.S. have been on the rise for decades and are highly correlated to the impacts of the industrialization of the food system and modern westernized diets. Food is the single strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental stability. How food is produced, what is consumed, and how much is lost or wasted all heavily shape the health of people and planet. In order to make improvements in the food production system, reduce food loss and waste, and help shift society towards a sustainable, healthy dietary pattern, multi-sector and multi-level action that is driven by sustainability and systematic innovation must be taken. The United Nations Global Sustainable Development Goals entail a global agreement to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all, where the needs of the present generation are satisfied without threatening the needs of future generations. Most of the 17 primary goals that are outlined in the agreement involve growing attention to food loss and waste and food insecurity or hunger. The achievement of food security, improved nutrition, sustainable agriculture worldwide are expected to positively affect all of the 17 goals, which also happen to involve sustainable water management, climate change, marine resources, terrestrial ecosystems, forestry, and biodiversity. The Paris Agreement is another global aim started in 2016 to strengthen the response to the threat of climate change and help countries deal with the inevitable impacts we currently face. The agreement resolves to decarbonize the global energy systems by 2050 in order to mitigate climate change, maintain sustainable development goals, and achieve healthy diets for everyone on this planet. Due to the increasing awareness and discussion over the environmental implications of food production and food choices, demand for locally produced food has increased sharply in recent years. The number of farmers markets has tripled in the past 2 decades, with 8,600 markets currently nationwide. Community-supported agriculture programs have increased to nearly 8,000, up from just 400 in 2001 and only 2 in 1986. Interest in supporting local food systems is rising among federal, state, and local policymakers. The percentage of school districts participating in farm-to-school programs, which use local farms as food suppliers for school meal programs, has reached 42%, which translates to roughly 42,587 participating schools, not to mention the growing number of school garden programs, which further connect children to how food is grown and produced. Local food networks are increasingly becoming incorporated into programs designed to reduce food insecurity, like SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children. Due to their successful outcomes and ability to further support small farmers and rural economies, encourage more healthful eating habits, and foster closer community connections. So, what is local seasonality? Unlike organic food, there is no legal or universally accepted definition of local food. In part, it is a geographical concept related to the distance between food producers and consumers. In addition to geographic proximity of producer and consumer, local food can also be defined in terms of social and supply chain characteristics. The Department for Environment, Food, and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, has proposed 2 definitions, global seasonality and local seasonality, based on results of several studies. Both refer to food that is grown or produced outdoors in their natural growing season for the country or region of where it is produced, without the use of additional energy, thereby not creating additional greenhouse gas emissions. However, global seasonality focuses solely on where food is produced and not on where it is consumed. Local seasonality, on the other hand, involves food that is grown and produced in its natural season outdoors and consumed in the same climatic zone. This distinction is important because it means that there is no requirement of high energy use for climate modification, refrigeration, storage, and transportation. The concept of local food may also extend to who produced the food, the personality, and the ethics of the grower, the care taken on the farm and the surrounding landscape, as well as other factors that make up the story behind food. Local food systems have also been synonymous with small farms that are committed to social and economic relationships. This kind of social embeddedness in the sense of social connections, mutual exchange, and trust is viewed by some as an important feature of direct agricultural marketing. The term provenance, which describes the method or tradition of production that is attributable to local influences, seems to capture the essence of this component of the local food definition. Now, what is sustainable nutrition? The concept of incorporating sustainability aspects of the human diet with those of nutrition was first evoked more than 20 years ago. It started with a concern over environmental implications of food production and the need to incorporate sustainability into nutritional guidelines. Sustainable nutrition analyzes the food supply chain at all stages, from input and primary production to processing, distribution, preparation, consumption, and waste disposal. In short, sustainable nutrition is simply about choosing foods that are healthy for our bodies and for the environment, which just so happens to overlap. Research continues to show that a dietary pattern rich in plant-based whole foods is highly nutritious and significantly reduces negative impacts on the environment. Kind of a win-win. Healthy, sustainable, plant-forward choices feature minimally processed, slow metabolizing plant foods such as fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans and other legumes and soy foods, nuts and seeds, and healthy plant oils, herbs and spices, and place animal-based foods in a reduced or optional role with special emphasis on decreasing purchases of red meat and food sourced from animals raised with routine, non-therapeutic use of antibiotics. These choices prioritize fish and poultry among animal-based proteins, with dairy options and eggs playing a supportive role if desired. Furthermore, it emphasizes a rich diversity of whole foods versus an undue focus on specific nutrients and percentages. It ensures calorie quality over calorie quantity. It celebrates cultural diversity and personal needs and preferences while being unapologetic about the importance of deliciousness, such as including room in our diets for foods of special occasion. Beyond emphasizing plant foods, the way foods are produced in terms of agricultural practice and farming methods has a significant ecological implication that varies widely. Organic or traditional farming without the use of pesticides, nitrogenous fertilizers can decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 25%. Land use is currently responsible for a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions due to deforestation, soil management, fertilization. Roughly half, about 44%, is related to production of meat and milk, while only 8% actually corresponds to plant-based foods like vegetables, fruits, and grains. Reduced soil erosion, higher biodiversity, and less harmful residues in soil and water, such as nitrates, pesticides, and antibiotics, as well as facilitation of soil components such as humus, which absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, are other positive effects of sustainable and organic farming. It has also been shown that foods produced from this method of agriculture contain higher levels of phytochemicals, which are health-promoting plant compounds, as well as there is no trace residue of pesticides, nitrates, animal medications, and food additives. Now on to the benefits of eating locally and seasonally. First of all, we're lucky to live in a region known for its agricultural abundance, regional food, and farm-to-table culture. With the diversity of several climate zones, deep, rich, fertile soil, and plentiful rainfall, Western Washington offers incredible access to locally grown produce and locally raised, harvested, cultivated, and foraged foods from land and sea. The benefits are numerous, involving health at the individual, community, environment, and global level, and further promote the livelihood and well-being of our local food producers, the farmers, the ranchers, fishermen, foragers, artisans, and more, who work so hard to put food on our tables. Local seasonality and sustainable nutrition offer improvements to our nutrition, health, and well-being, as well as help support our local farmers, economy, community, while promoting environmental and global health. Let's start with discussing nutrition. Localization is linked to a dietary change that improves nutrition based on increased access and subsequent intake of fresh produce, fruits, vegetables, and other whole, plant-based, nutrient-dense foods like legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Research shows that creating an individualized dietary pattern rich in plant-based whole foods is highly nutritious and significantly reduces risk factors for the most common health conditions and diseases of morbidity and mortality in the U.S. Choosing seasonal produce allows you to try new foods and cooking methods that you may not have otherwise. Branching out in your food bravery department can help improve your overall health. A nice side effect of eating seasonally is a more nutritionally varied diet. Fruits and vegetables have a high concentration of nutrients, as we know, vitamins, minerals, and fiber that are lacking in the U.S. diet. Most Americans are far below the daily dietary recommendation of the 2.5 cups of vegetables and 2 cups of whole fruit, and well above the recommended 5.5 ounces of protein, which should also have emphasized lean protein sources and less red meat, and 6 ounces of grains, of which at least half should be whole grains like rice, buckwheat, millet, quinoa, and others. In addition, many westernized diets contain most of the day's calories from foods that offer little nutrition, such as highly refined packaged foods with high levels of added sugar, sodium, and saturated fat. Research shows that individuals attending farmers markets regularly increase their fruit and vegetable intake by 1/4 to 1 full serving per day. The more whole, fresh foods you incorporate into your diet, the less room there is for the less nutrient-dense options, right? Furthermore, prolonged ripening periods and less time between harvest and consumption allows for higher levels of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and antioxidants to be retained within the food. That means you get more bang for your buck. Plants get their nourishment from the sun and the soil, so when that changes, so do their nutrients. For example, a study in Japan found 3 times more vitamin C in spinach harvested in the summer versus the winter. In addition, seasonal products generally contain fewer harmful residues like pesticides and nitrates because they're being grown in accordance with their natural cycles and are better able to fend for themselves against pathogens. Shopping locally and following the seasonal variations of food grown in the region also adds more overall variety on the plate. Many of you may be familiar with the recommendation to add more colors to your plate, to eat the rainbow, but we're talking about fruits and vegetables, not Skittles. That is because the colors of fruits and vegetables are correlated to a unique array of nutrients which provide different essential vitamins and minerals to our bodies. For instance, red and orange, like bell peppers, mango, citrus, carrots, is associated with high vitamin A, beta-carotene, vitamin C, while blue and purple fruits and vegetables, like cabbage and beets, correlate to high levels of anthocyanin, which is a very powerful antioxidant. Green leafy vegetables, on the other hand, are chock full of vitamin K, iron, and calcium. As a general rule, staple whole foods, particularly fruits, vegetables, beans, and whole grains, are cheaper than manufactured packaged convenience foods. Direct-to-consumer sales, which means farmer to consumer or farmer to you, is often also less expensive due to less overage costs involved in the production, processing, and transportation. Although market-based comparisons are difficult to assess due to factors of season, location, and generalization of individual items, studies do show that consumers perceive items at farmers markets to be lower or more reasonably priced and of higher quality than supermarkets. A study done on 230 produce items in 12 North Carolina counties during the summertime found an average price savings of 18% at farmers markets. There are also several other benefits that occur at the individual level. Overall, seasonal produce grown on local farms is fresher and tastier. Unlike out-of-season produce that is harvested early in order to be shipped and distributed to your local retail store, crops picked at the peak of ripeness have had ample time to develop full flavor. With less travel distance, the perfectly ripened food will get to you before it has lost its quality and flavor. Have you ever tasted a spaghetti squash in the spring and realized it is much harder to shred and kind of tastes bland? Or a peach in the winter that tastes nothing like the fresh, ripe, juicy peach from the summer? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Even though we all like to eat strawberries year-round, the best time to eat them is, of course, when they can be purchased from a local grower here in Washington, and shortly after harvest. Incorporating more whole foods into the diet often requires more handling and preparation. Cooking from scratch can provide enhanced cooking skills, comfortability in the kitchen, and culinary inspiration. Many do experience a greater enjoyment and sensory perception of meals when they use food grown and purchased directly from local farms that they then spend time to prepare. Knowing who grew your food and from where it was produced also creates a stronger appreciation for the food and those involved. Positive relationships are certainly built between farmer and consumer, where there is more transparency and trust. There are more opportunities to have conversations about the taste and preparation tips for the food, as well as how to best store the food and what may be available in the coming weeks. Many farmers grow unique regional varieties that also cannot be found in grocery stores. Going to farmers markets, farms, and farm-to-table activities and events in your area will help build a network with other local community members and create meaningful community connections. I've actually met many of my dearest friends in this way. The cost savings of eating local boils down to a matter of supply and demand. When you buy in-season produce, you are buying food at the peak of its supply. Because local farms often harvest seasonal produce, food distribution costs go down, along with the price you pay at the store. The truth of the matter is, eating healthy can be expensive, sure, but it does not have to be expensive. Planning your meals around seasonal produce can save you tons of money in the long run. Supporting our farms and farmers, the people that put food on our tables. Farmers in the U.S. now account for only 1% of the population, as we discussed. If I asked you which represented a higher percentage of all farms in the U.S., would you say the large-scale farms or the small-scale family farms? Well, interestingly, large-scale farms, which happen to represent 39% of production, account for only 2.5% of all farms in the U.S., while small-scale family farms account for 89% of farms, but only 26% of production. In 2017, only 14 cents of every dollar spent on food went back to the farm, while in comparison, in 1975, it was 40 cents for every dollar spent on food went back to the farm. As cropland decreases and farmers leave their farms for other, more secure means of income, it is dire we do support and encourage farming in our local rural communities. For farms participating in local food supply chains or direct-to-consumer marketing, they receive a greater share of retail price than they do in mainstream chains like wholesalers, grocery stores, and food processors. Net revenue per unit in local chains ranges from equal to more than 7 times the price received in mainstream chains. In all direct markets, producers also assume responsibility for additional supply chain functions such as processing, distribution, and marketing. By eliminating the middlemen, farmers capture revenue that would otherwise accrue to a third party. Normally, costs incurred to bring a product to market total between 13 and 62% of the retail price, whereas direct market supply chains allow farmers nearly 100% of their retail price. Due to the locality of distribution, there is also less need for transportation, handling, refrigeration, and time in storage, further reducing overall costs of production for the farmer. The independence that the farmers have when selling their products directly to consumers provides a desirable simplicity and transparency. Farmers usually just want to be farmers. They want to grow food for you, not necessarily desire to be businessmen. Furthermore, the positive relationships with their community and local buyers provides a network of support that will guarantee future welfare of the farm. This support happens to help farms and ranchers do their part to protect and restore natural systems by focusing on best management practices like minimizing use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, avoiding use of groundwater for irrigation, and minimizing on-farm food losses through improvements in processing, packaging, storage, and transport. Most powerfully, this support of local farmers helps ensure that they are able to continue the sustainable practice of choosing crops well suited for the local growing condition and further encourages other farms to participate as well. Now on to the environmental benefits. In the year 2017, agriculture was responsible for 8.4% of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Methane, nitrogen dioxide, carbon dioxide are a few of the main greenhouse gases emitted by agricultural activities. Localization offers several environmental benefits, most of which are related to a reduction of these greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the farm to consumer distance, less fuel consumption per kilometer, less proportion of energy wasted, reduced storage requirements, processing, and packaging, as well as farmland preservation. The need for energy and the emissions caused by transportation of food products, aka food miles, is extremely high for airplanes, trucks, and trains. Short distances from farm to consumer provides transport efficiency, which ultimately reduces energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. The less miles food travels between the farm and the consumer, the more energy efficient it is. However, I should point out that research does show the impact of transportation on total greenhouse gas emissions and use of natural resources is minimal compared to other aspects of the food chain cycle. Processing, packaging, and selling food uses more than 10 times as much energy as the transportation of food. Food packaging has become increasingly energy intensive, especially with the popularity of individually wrapped single-serving portions. Packaging for both food and non-food products represents nearly 1/3 of all U.S. municipal waste. The way foods are produced in terms of agricultural practices and farming methods have significant ecological implications that vary widely. The longer the food chain cycle is from production to distribution to consumption, the more opportunities there are for food waste and increased energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. In the US, over 55% of embodied energy in fresh produce was wasted. Local produce sales have been shown to reduce waste at the harvest to retail level by 49% and by 12% at the retail to consumer purchase level. Production inputs such as machinery, fertilizers, fuel, and electricity contribute also to greenhouse gas emissions and happen to account for over 80% of the average U.S. household's carbon footprint. The use of these inputs, as well as pesticides and other chemicals, also affects soil, water, air quality, as well as wildlife health and habitat. The Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that 75 billion tons of soil on agriculturally fertile land is lost to erosion annually, which is the deterioration of the most nutrient-rich and fertile topsoil due to the impacts of water, wind, and agricultural activity. Food production also requires substantial amounts of water, while climate change is further aggravating water scarcity. Water consumption for food production has doubled between 1960 and today. Changes in diet, cutting food loss and waste, and sourcing from farmers who practice water-saving techniques is important. It has been shown that organic or traditional sustainable farming without the use of pesticides and nitrogenous fertilizers can decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 25%. Seasonal cultivation in the open causes less emissions of carbon dioxide since it does not require heating oil for greenhouse or plastic tunnels. Furthermore, according to the Censuses of Agriculture, conventional producers spend more on average for chemical inputs and fertilizers, while direct-to-consumer farms, regardless of being certified organic or not, are more likely to use manure. Direct-to-consumer producers are also more likely than non-direct-to-consumer producers to use the environmentally friendly management practices ascribed to organic production. Overall, sustainable farming practices and the support of local food production chains helps to reduce soil erosion, decrease harmful residues found in soil and water, such as pesticides, nitrates, and antibiotics, increase biodiversity, and facilitate beneficial soil components. So how does local seasonality and sustainable nutrition support the local economy? Local food systems are almost always guaranteed to positively impact the local economy and may also help in the development of social capital and preservation of environmental quality for rural areas. Regional marketing and cooperation help secure livelihoods through regional networks between local farmers, processors, and retailers that make up the small and medium-sized businesses within a community. When consumers purchase their foods in local food markets within a specific area, that money stays in the community, helping to encourage growth in the local labor market. If consumers purchase food produced within a local area instead of imports from outside the area, sales are likely to accrue to people and businesses within the area. This may then generate additional economic impacts as workers and businesses spend the additional income on production inputs and other products within the area. Likewise, more job opportunities will be created for people living in the community, as there is a higher need for local production, processing, and distribution. Local food markets may stimulate additional business activity within the local economy by improving business skills and opportunities. Farmers markets have been shown to help medium and large-scale enterprises to expand or complement existing, well-established businesses. For small vendors, farmers markets can operate as a relatively low-risk incubator for new businesses and a primary venue for part-time enterprises in a nurturing type environment. The direct relationships formed between these local economy networks can likely lead to a more trustworthy and transparent economy for that particular community. And now let's move on to global impacts. Presently, mankind has to cope with the huge global challenges of poverty and food insecurity in low-income countries, as well as climate change. Food insecurity involved a state of being without reliable access to a sufficient and consistent quantity of affordable, nutritious foods. Access to affordable, nutritious foods is the number one barrier in preventing hunger and malnutrition worldwide. And yes, it does happen in the US. Through increasing access to healthy, fresh foods at a reasonable cost, local food systems help decrease risk of food insecurity and malnutrition. The presence of a farmer's market, for instance, in a low-income neighborhood is directly linked to higher fruit and vegetable consumption, as well as overweight and obesity rates. Improving the availability of food is only a first step towards improving food security and nutrition. Another big culprit is food loss and waste. In the US, 28% of all greenhouse gas emissions from the food system end up as food waste. While the foods most wasted per calorie are fats, oils, grains, and sweeteners, the food with the highest total wasted greenhouse gas emissions during production are red meats and dairy. Food losses occur along the food supply chain during production, processing, and distribution, while food waste occurs at the retail and consumption level. Important causes of on-farm losses include inadequate harvesting time, climatic conditions, certain practices applied at harvest and handling, and challenges in marketing produce. Significant losses are caused by inadequate storage conditions as well as decisions made at an earlier stage of the supply chain, which predispose products to a shorter shelf life. There is increasing recognition of the potential synergies within the agri-food system between reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing malnutrition worldwide. Reducing waste at all levels reduces cost and increases availability, especially of produce, while decreasing average greenhouse gas emissions per unit of food consumed. More sustainable farming and agriculture practices, which, as we've discussed, work to preserve farmland, use less natural resources, and help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, will ultimately help to produce more food with less waste and ensure the future of farming and the future of food. Global food production threatens climate stability and ecosystem resilience and constitutes the single largest driver of environmental degradation. Climate change and water scarcity are among the greatest threats to the $800 billion U.S. food service industry and the nation's food system overall. 2018 turned out to be the fourth warmest year since scientists started measuring temperatures, and the severity of extreme events around the world were reported frequently. Without major changes in the way we farm and fish, these factors combined will make growing conditions more challenging for a wide variety of crops, and farming and ranching far less predictable. Food systems are both a major source of greenhouse gas emissions and a driver of land use change in ways that can further aggravate climate change. Beyond a dietary shift, we also urgently need to reduce fossil fuels use across the supply chain. Though we won't discuss it in too much detail here, it's worth mentioning food recovery and redistribution programs are happening. They're also referred to as food rescue, donation, or gleaning. They're charitable acts that involve distributing foods that would otherwise be lost or wasted. Neglected until only a decade ago by policymakers, programs such as food banks, nonprofit organizations, community shops, social supermarkets, pantry kitchens, or school food and nutrition programs are now playing an increasingly important role not only as food loss or waste solutions, but also as a means to promote the right to food. Now you hopefully understand the what and the why behind local seasonality and sustainable nutrition. So how do you participate? There are many ways, as you've probably imagined during this discussion, but first is knowing what local resources you have. The primary venues for local foods are mainly direct-to-consumer markets and include farmers markets, community-supported agriculture, also known as CSAs, farm stands, on-farm sales, and pick-your-own operations. Supporting your local farm-to-table restaurants and food service establishments also helps, and doubly helps, in that it supports the local farmers supplying their restaurant while also supporting the restaurant who is further promoting the local food chain systems present in the community. Dietary shifts towards sustainable nutrition, which is eating a more whole foods, plant-based diet that emphasizes seasonal and local foods, as we've discussed, has significant impacts on both your health and the health of the environment. However, this is not an all or nothing approach. Everyone is at a different place when it comes to making dietary changes. Start where you are at. Start with small changes. And remember, there's room for all foods in our diet. You do not have to be vegan to make a change. When considering the impacts, know that every plant-based meal or choice of healthier option will contribute. Some may choose a full vegan diet, vegetarian, or simply just do a meatless Monday or one plant-based meal a day. Where you source your food, keeping in mind the quality and the distance traveled, is also important with any food choice and could make just as much of a difference. And if you can grow food at home, try it. Before we move on, let me tell you a little more about what these resources really are. Farmers markets are physical retail marketplaces typically held outdoors that are designed to sell foods directly from local farmers to consumers. It provides a direct-to-consumer market where farmers do not require wholesalers, food processors, or grocery stores to distribute their produce or products. Farmers also have less need for transportation, handling, refrigeration, and storage, as they usually harvest shortly before the market day. Usually, these markets are held once a week and only during growing seasons. Farm stands and U-picks, on the other hand, are direct-to-consumer markets held near or on the farm, owned and operated by the farmer or farmers. Farm stands are small markets that sell the farm fresh produce and other farm goods, while U-picks work as an alternate selling method where farm visitors can actually harvest their own produce from the farm directly. U-pick is either appealing as a fun, interactive, educational experience or as a way to choose highest quality freshness, usually at a lower cost, since essentially you're doing all the work. A CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, which is another way to connect food producers and consumers within the food system more closely. It involves a seasonal subscription to a local farm or group of farms for the harvest of locally grown produce and sometimes other goods produced on the farm like eggs, cheese, poultry, meat, and flowers. Depending on the farm, the CSA box usually contains between 8 to 10 items, usually selected by the farm. Some CSAs offer customizations and add-ons. Usually, subscriptions involve a weekly or bi-weekly share, but some CSAs offer a one-time order. The box is either delivered to your home address or provided as a specified pickup location. Farm-to-table restaurants in their purest sense is referring to a table at the farm where the chef prepares and serves the menu. This setting is most commonly seen now for special events, fundraisers, and educational farm events. The term has now become more of a practice that emphasizes a direct relationship between a farm and a restaurant and a chef. The restaurant or chef buy directly from the local farm or farms rather than large food distributors. In addition, the farmer may allow the chef to request special varieties to be grown just for the restaurant menu. Farm-to-table restaurants are also known for their chef-driven regional cuisine, which further encourages the local food system and economy, supports sustainability efforts, and promotes sustainable nutrition for its guests. This symbiotic relationship offers benefits to both parties. The chef obtains high-quality ingredients with better freshness, taste, appearance, and nutrition as the food is delivered within hours of harvesting. Farmers, on the other hand, reap more profits from their goods than they would earn at a market. Many farmers enjoy knowing how and where their food will be cooked and are often featured on the restaurant's printed menu and/or chalkboards. There are many levels of farm-to-table, from casual to fine dining, particularly in the Pacific Northwest dining culture, as you'll see from your guidebook. Another fantastic feature is the use of seasonality charts. These allow you to reference which foods are currently in season any month of the year, specific to your region. These will help you choose produce that is grown in their natural cycle to promote sustainability and help increase your intake of fruits and vegetables. Choosing foods in season in your region also offer better freshness, flavor, quality, and increased nutrients while reducing food cost. We are truly very lucky in Washington State, an agricultural powerhouse. Washington grows more than 300 different crops, and despite significant seasonal shifts, can produce seasonal crops at least 10 months out of the year. Washington farms contribute $51 billion and 16,000 jobs to the state's economy, and we lead the nation in production of apples, hops, spearmint, Concord grapes, sweet cherries, pears, raspberries, and blueberries. These charts are part of the guidebook you have received as a participant of this program, but I thought I'd show them here as well. These were created by the Washington State Department of Agriculture's Farm to School program and are categorized by food group and color nutrient. They only include produce that is regional as well. If it isn't grown in Washington at some point every year, it won't be in the chart. Here, this one is for fruits, categorized by vitamin A rich, vitamin C rich, and the rest, as well as herbs. The colored boxes indicate that it's in season for that column's month. So for the apricots, as you can see from the top row, they're in season, as in they're ready to harvest and eat, from June to August. You'll find some that have several growing seasons and others have continuous seasons, like apples and pears, while still having a peak harvest season, which is notated by the asterisk. This one is all vegetables, broken up by dark leafy greens, red-orange, like carrots, bell peppers, pumpkins, tomatoes, starchy, like corn and potatoes, and then other for everything else. The guidebook you've received contains an extensive but not exhaustive list of local resources specific to Pierce, King, and Thurston County. This includes all the resources we've discussed: farmers markets, local farm stands, U-Picks, CSAs, and farm-to-table restaurants. It'll also provide a brief overview and reminder of the what, how, and why of local seasonality and sustainable nutrition, as well as the seasonality charts with additional chart for foraging wild local foods like mushrooms, nettles, and fiddlehead ferns. Yes, they're edible and quite delicious. You've also received a recipe catalog that was created specifically for this program by myself. I compiled and adapted the recipes from some of my favorite chefs and recipe books and blogs, as well as included a few of my own. The catalog is categorized by season: spring, summer, fall, and winter, with about 10 to 15 recipes per season. The recipes highlight sustainable nutrition and plant-based eating, with most recipes noting options for fully vegan or not. The primary focus of the recipes is to incorporate local seasonal ingredients and focus on Pacific Northwest regional cuisine while leveraging global flavors. I do hope you enjoy. Today we're going to do a demo recipe that features one of the spring recipes from the catalog that I've sent to all of you. It's going to be the creamy polenta with vibrant spring vegetables in nettle gremolata. It's a very elegant recipe, but it's pretty simple to make, and it features asparagus, green beans, we have snap peas, parsley, fresh thyme, a lot of the vibrant green produce that we have seasonal and local to us right now. We are featuring stinging nettle in our food today. Some of you may be familiar with using it in food. It's a very nutritious, health-promoting wild green that grows everywhere. Of course, you want to deactivate the stinger if you're going to eat it, so we want to be sure we blanch it first. Also, the recipe calls for the option to use some of the other wild edibles that can be located regional here, and that includes fiddlehead ferns, morel mushrooms, and porcini mushrooms. Today, we're still using wild local mushrooms, and then instead of fiddlehead ferns, we are going to replace it with additional snap peas, green beans, asparagus. Fiddlehead ferns, if you don't already know, are a variety of fern that's very tender, and just at this time of year, very short time of year, it's the little coil that grows out, which is why they call it the fiddlehead, after the instrument, the little curl in the end. And they're just very tender, very nutritious. They are toxic if you do not cook them though. Okay, let's get started. We are going to be making an elegant recipe that features vibrant spring produce and wild edible foods of the Pacific Northwest. We're pairing it today with a flavorful traditional Italian chopped herb condiment called gremolata, which is essentially olive oil mixed with lemon juice, garlic, and whatever very finely chopped herb of your choice. We will be serving it over a creamy porridge-like polenta, which is yellow cornmeal that's ground. Today we're using all local ingredients: fresh green asparagus, snap peas, wild local mushrooms, fresh thyme, nettles here, which be careful handling because they will sting you if they're still fresh. We've got lemons, which are actually from California, and they are Meyer lemons, which I do tend to prefer for their less acidic, sweeter flavored juice. And then we also have green beans as well. The polenta is here, and it again is a cornmeal. So we've removed the tough ends of the asparagus, and now we're going to cut into about 1 to 2 inch slices. And I don't like to cut too deep into the flowering top, so even if it's not 1 to 2 inches, I'll still maintain that by itself. And we're using about 2 cups of those chopped asparagus pieces, which is a little less than 1 full bunch, kind of like that. Now we're going to do about 1 cup of fresh green beans, and we've already removed the ends from them, and we're just going to chop them into small bite-sized pieces. And here we've got our spring peas. We're going to do the same as the green beans, small bite-sized pieces, which probably just do them in half, since they are already small, and I don't want to have too many uneven pieces, and it's going to be about 1 cup. Next, we'll take our mushrooms. We're going to start with the maitake, and we'll just chop it pretty finely. We're going to use 1 full cup of maitake and 1 full cup of the other mushrooms. We're going to save off the end just because it is a little woody. And I don't want to chop it too fine. I might just break apart some of the pieces that are larger. I don't want to mess with it too much. These I also recommend not washing them with water, instead using a vegetable brush or a dry brush. That's what I did, and they're very clean and beautiful. That goes into our bowl. Okay, now I'm going to use the remainder of the mushroom varieties. This one here is a trumpet royale, and then this one here I believe is a forest namiko, so some people may call it a shimeji. So again, we're just going to chop off the woody end of the stem. Set that aside. You could always use those ends for broth. Set those aside. And I think what I'm going to do with these, since they are a little larger, is I'll probably slice in half lengthwise. Break these apart. These ones are smaller, but I'm still going to use that method. I might even do these ones once more since they're larger. These guys are small, so I'm just going to break them apart. I might chop off that larger, more woody stem. Again, save it aside for broth. Okay, beautiful. So it's probably a little more than 1 cup, but to me, more mushroom, more better. Actually, it's about exact, so good enough. Okay, so in our spring veggie mix that we're going to cook, we are going to also add thyme and a few cloves of garlic, which you can also use shallot for a little bit of a milder taste because we are using garlic in the gremolata as well. And we're gonna want about one to 2 teaspoons of fresh thyme. It's probably 4 to 5 sprigs. And that's my trick, is just taking it like this and running opposite of the way the leaves grow, pinching off the top. It's the easiest way to do it. I actually really love the flavor of thyme, so even if I add a little more than the recipe calls for, it's okay with me. And just pick out any larger stems that you see. With the garlic, we are going to use, for the spring veggies that we're going to cook on the stovetop, we're going to use 1 to 2 cloves of garlic. If you're using a shallot, you can use just 1 small shallot. And that, of course, gives you a little bit of a milder taste, like a cross between garlic and onion. Adds a little more complexity to the dish if you're already going to be using garlic in another component of the dish. So 1 to 2 cloves is plenty. And sometimes I crush it, sometimes I don't. Honestly, it kind of depends on the clove. So we're going to mince. Make sure you get any peels out. Garlic, I'm sure you know, is extremely health promoting, beneficial as an antiseptic, antifungal, helps with blood pressure, lowers cholesterol, and it tastes very good. So that's about plenty. We're also going to be using garlic for our gremolata as well. So I'm just going to chop these while I have them here. Before we move on, I just want to talk briefly about the nutrient content of all of our ingredients. Again, as I mentioned, they are all local and seasonal at the moment to the Pacific Northwest. Western Washington is where we're at right now, Pierce County. And just look at that beautiful asparagus. So, as you can see, and as we discussed, we mentioned color related to nutrient content, specifically and most commonly in fruits and vegetables. Many of these spring vegetables are the same hue of green. So, if you think about their nutrient quality, they all have a fairly similar nutrient profile. They all are very high sources of vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K. Folate is another big one. Let's see, asparagus and green beans, as well as mushrooms, are high sources of plenty of B vitamins like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, B6, and then most of them contain a pretty good source of iron, phosphorus, potassium, and manganese. And then asparagus has some copper. Green beans have a little bit more potassium by a small amount. And of course, all of them are complex carbohydrates. They do have a little bit of protein, especially for vegetable source of protein. The green beans, the snap peas, and the mushrooms are fairly good sources of protein as far as vegetables go. They don't have a lot, of course, but it's significantly more than other vegetables. No fat, and then, of course, very high in fiber. Mushrooms in particular are kind of a nutrient powerhouse. Tons of health benefits of mushrooms. Actually, one of the only food sources, especially vegan or plant-based food sources, of vitamin D. They don't have a lot, but they do have some. They're chock full of antioxidants, beta-glucans, which are immune stimulating. Also nettles, carefully handling these because I was already stung. Nettles are another kind of powerful green food. They are very nourishing and nutrient rich. They're kind of similar nutrient profile in terms of the vitamins and minerals, vitamin A, vitamin C, K, very easily assimilated calcium and iron, good sources of magnesium, potassium, beta carotene, and chlorophyll. Aside from that, they're also, like mushrooms, very health promoting in terms of their antioxidant and polyphenol content. They're really good as an anti-inflammatory. They're good for seasonal allergies, for pain, anemia. Okay, so now we're blanching the nettles with tongs. We're just going to add them to gently boiling, pre-boiled water after it's gone down a bit. They're in the water now. Just kind of let them gently simmer in there. You don't want to overcook them. There we go. So all their stingers should be deactivated now. And then we're going to cool them off under cold water and then take off the stems and then add them to our blender. We want the zest from one full lemon. Trick, if you're doing zest and juice, always make sure you zest first. It's very hard to zest a juiced lemon. I'll zest and then I'll add it to the blender. So you can see that beautiful zest coming off. And it's smart to also wash the outside of the lemon if you're going to be zesting it. You see what happens to the lemon? You're just getting that beautiful zest out of there. Okay, so that made a fair amount. There's our zest. Kind of looks like orange zest, which is also delicious, but that's because the Meyer lemons are slightly darker shade of yellow. Okay, so that was all the zest we needed. So now we're going to cut the same one we zested in half. The recipe calls for 2 to 3 teaspoons of lemon juice. I personally love lemon and lemony things, so I'm probably just going to actually throw in an extra lemon just for the heck of it, since I have them. And because these are a little bit milder too. So using my trusty lemon juice squeezer, but I also often will just do the hand trick where you squeeze it over your hand to catch the seeds, and that usually works pretty well. So I'm just gonna squeeze it over my Vitamix. Gets the juice out pretty well. I'm using the lime section because these lemons are fairly small. Okay, so the last few ingredients we're going to be adding is olive oil, just plain old simple olive oil, chili flakes and black pepper, and a pinch of sea salt. Chili flakes are optional. Usually if there's an option for heat, I usually add it. Olive oil, of course, is also an excellent source of monounsaturated fatty acids, which is a great choice for fat in the diet. It's plentiful of antioxidants and vitamin E and vitamin K. Okay, so next we're going to cook our lovely polenta. We're going to take half a cup of cornmeal and cook it in a medium pot in 2.5 cups of water. So we are going to put it on high heat and bring the water to a boil. And then once the water is boiling, we're going to gradually whisk in the polenta. Okay, so now we're adding the polenta to the boiling water, and we're going to whisk it in, and then we'll take it down to a simmer. We're going to cook that for about 10 minutes, simmering, covered, low heat. While that's cooking, the polenta, we're going to blend our nettle parsley gremolata. So again, we have the parsley, we have the nettles, which we blanched first. We have olive oil, lemon juice, a little bit of salt, pepper, chili flakes, and garlic. Okay, so this is what our gremolata looks like. Nice and green. Next, we're going to cook our spring vegetables in a skillet pan. Cast iron would be great for this as well if you have it. And those are other veggies we chopped up earlier. Our polenta is cooking at the moment as well. In a few minutes, which will be our 10-minute mark, we want to check on it and stir it again. Polenta does tend to stick and clump up. It'll only cook for about 20 minutes, so you might only need to check it once through. This is what it looks like as it's cooking. We'll leave that cooking. I stirred it very well, and then we'll just keep it on low simmer for another 10 minutes. So to cook the spring vegetables, we're going to be using some olive oil in the pan. We have the minced garlic, fresh thyme. We're going to add the mushrooms first, and then add the rest: asparagus, the green beans, the snap peas. Let them cook for a few minutes, and then we'll add our other ingredients. White wine, or you can use sherry wine. You could use water as well, but the wine would give it a little bit of a more complex flavor. Okay, so we've got our olive oil heated. We're gonna start with our mushrooms first. Let those cook. Another trick when cooking mushrooms is you actually don't really need oil, neither do you need water. You can just put them in a pan over heat, and the mushrooms will naturally release liquid, and then they'll cook that way. So we'll let these cook for about 4 minutes. Look how beautiful they are. Okay, so those have cooked for about 4 minutes. We're going to add our garlic and thyme, or if you're using shallot. Smells amazing. And then we're going to add the rest of our vegetables. Let it cook for about 5 minutes until al dente, which is just tender crisp, to kind of start to turn a vibrant, even more vibrant green color. See, and this is why I really wanted to do this demo live. I mean, I know we all are missing each other regardless. The smells are amazing. Be fun to all interact while it's cooking, taste together. We're letting this cook for, again, 5 minutes. At that point, we're going to give a little splash of wine or water, and then we'll turn up the heat to just a little bit like medium high, which will help cook off the wine. We'll add a little bit of pepper. A little bit of sea salt. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes, a little more. we're going to turn up the heat and add that little splash of wine, which I have here. You can use any white wine you like, doesn't have to be expensive.